The Brand New Day trailer dropped this morning and I've watched it about 7 times. The surface level stuff is already everywhere. Tom Holland is back, of course. Punisher's in it too. But what else is there? What I want to talk about is everything underneath that. Because this trailer is dense in a way that most Marvel trailers aren't, and a lot of what it's setting up connects to some of the most significant Spider-Man comic runs ever written. If you know where to look, this isn't just a first look at a fun summer blockbuster. It's a roadmap for what's to come. Let's look through it. The trailer opens where No Way Home ended. Peter Parker made the world forget who he is, not just his identity as Spider-Man. Everyone, MJ doesn't know him, Ned doesn't know him, his Aunt May is dead. He lives alone in a cramped apartment in a city that doesn't know his name, and he's devoted himself entirely to being Spider-Man because there's nothing else left. What the trailer makes clear is that 4 years of that have taken a serious toll. He's checking up on Ned and MJ from a distance, watching them live lives he removed himself from. There's a party scene near the end of the trailer where he introduces himself to MJ as just a neighbor from across the hall, and she calls him a friendly neighbor, which makes him choke on his drink.
I'm MJ.
I'm just a neighbor from across the hall.
Friendly neighbor.
That's not a throwaway gag. The friendly neighborhood Spider-Man line is one of the most recognizable phrases attached to this character, and having MJ say a version of it to a Peter she doesn't recognize is the film doing something quietly devastating with the setup they built in No Way Home. The weight of what Peter sacrificed is visible in how Holland plays him here. He looks tired in a way the earlier films never really showed. Not physically tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of having no one. He's smiling through moments that are clearly hurting him, and the trailer's strongest beats are the ones where that performance comes through the action. Holland has always been the best live-action Peter Parker specifically because he plays the kid inside the suit so well. This film is clearly designed to push that side of him harder than any of the ones before it. MJ still has the necklace Peter gave her in Far From Home. She doesn't know why she kept it, but she kept it. That detail is doing quite a bit of work. She's also moved on. The trailer shows her with a new boyfriend played by Eamon Esfandi. If you know the comics, that character's name is Paul, and he is genuinely the most despised character in Spider-Man history because of what his introduction meant for Peter and MJ's relationship.
Sometimes Spider-Man has to do the hard thing, even if it breaks Peter Parker's heart.
The Brand New Day comic, this film takes its name from introduced Paul as part of a storyline that erased Peter and MJ's marriage from reality. Marvel is clearly aware of that history and is using it deliberately. They want you to feel what comics readers felt, which was the specific grief of watching someone meant to be with Peter move on with someone else while Peter watches from outside the window. This is the biggest thing in the trailer, and also the thing most people are going to miss the full significance of. Peter wakes up in a web cocoon attached to the outside of his apartment building. He's not wearing his web shooters. He panics, falls, and then instinctively fires a web to catch himself, except the web didn't come from a device, it came from his wrist. The MCU Spider-Man just developed organic webbing. This is a direct reference to Sam Raimi's 2002 Spider-Man, where Tobey Maguire's Peter was always able to produce organic webs. That version of Spider-Man proved so popular that Marvel Comics actually adapted the concept in 2004. Giving comics Peter organic webbing for a stretch. Then the One More Day storyline reverted it. The Brand New Day comics that followed were partly defined by Peter going back to mechanical web shooters. The new movie is essentially inverting that sequence, giving MCU Peter what his comic counterpart lost. But the organic webs aren't the main event. They're a symptom. Bruce Banner tells Peter that his DNA is mutating.
If DNA is mutating, it would be enormously dangerous.
We see shots of his senses overloading, a single drop of water deafening him. We see his eyes go jet black in a fight sequence. The trailer has narration describing how spiders have 3 life cycles, and that when a spider is between cycles, it's at its most vulnerable. But those who make it through experience something like a rebirth.
Spiders have 3 life cycles. When between cycles, it can leave the spider vulnerable to threats. And for those spiders who make it through, it amounts to a kind of rebirth.
That narration is pointing directly at 2 specific comic arcs. The first is the Six-Armed Saga from 1971, where a despairing Peter tried to cure himself of his powers and accidentally grew 4 extra arms instead, which introduced Morbius the Living Vampire. The second, and more likely primary inspiration, is The Other, a mid-2000s crossover event where Peter undergoes a mystical death and rebirth, shedding his old body and emerging from a web cocoon on the Brooklyn Bridge with a deeper connection to whatever cosmic spider force originally gave him his abilities. He came out of that story with upgraded powers including night vision, the ability to sense vibrations through his webs, and a more direct connection to the totemic spider entity the story calls The Other. The man-spider transformation is also in play here. Multiple shots in the trailer show Peter's body changing in ways that feel animalistic rather than just superhuman. His eyes going fully black is the most prominent, but the cocoon imagery and the emphasis on mutation throughout suggest the film is building towards something more drastic than just organic webs. Man-Spider is Peter's worst case, the full animal transformation, where the spider part consumes the man. Whether Brand New Day goes there fully or uses it as a threat hanging over the whole film is one of the biggest questions the new trailer brings to the table. Now, let's talk about the Rogues Gallery, because there are more villains in this trailer than most people counted. There are more of them than the trailer is letting on, but let's go through what we actually see. Scorpion is finally back. Michael Mando played Matt Gargan in Homecoming all the way back in 2017 and got one scene in the post-credits where he was clearly being set up for something bigger.
It's on our little spider friend. I've got some boys on the outside who would love to meet him. You know, take a picture, slice his throat.
9 years later, he's finally in a suit. His mechanized tail looks legitimately dangerous in the trailer, and the dialogue around him is interesting. He appears to warn Spider-Man to stay out of his way rather than coming after him directly, which suggests he might be tangled up in something bigger that Peter's also fighting rather than being the main threat himself. Tombstone is in the movie, but doesn't appear in the trailer beyond a quick shot. He's being played by Marvin Jones III, who's already voiced the character in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. In the comics, Tombstone, real name Lonnie Lincoln, is an albino crime boss with superhuman durability and strength from a chemical exposure. He's been one of Spider-Man's most consistent recurring crime antagonists for decades. The fact that the trailer barely shows him while other characters get more prominent moments suggests he might be the street-level threat underlying the whole film's criminal ecosystem, rather than someone who shows up for one fight scene. The Hand are in this movie. Red-clad ninjas with swords appear in what looks like a prison sequence with an unmasked Peter. The Hand are the mystical assassin organization that had a major role in Netflix's Daredevil and the Defenders, and their presence here is clearly setting up a connection to Matt Murdock. We haven't seen Daredevil confirmed in this cast, but given that Born Again Season 2 is happening and The Hand are in Brand New Day, the probability of a Charlie Cox cameo is extremely high. Like, Boomerang and Tarantula both appear in what sounds like a quick montage early in the film, according to sources who've seen the footage, used to establish Peter's day-to-day life as Spider-Man before the main story kicks in. Tarantula's appearance in the trailer appears to be a recreation of Amazing Spider-Man number 134, the character's debut issue. That kind of specific visual callback to a cover is something the film's marketing team does deliberately, and it's a good sign the people behind this movie know their comics. This is the most debated detail in the trailer, and for good reason. Sadie Sink appears only briefly, mostly hooded, and we never see her face clearly. What we do see are shots of people's minds being taken over, individuals losing control of their bodies while something else pilots them, and Damage Control apparently hunting whatever she is. The comicbook.com breakdown notes her characters causing chaos while being pursued by Damage Control. The leading theory is Jean Grey. The visual of minds being possessed and bodies being controlled maps directly to telepathic and telekinetic abilities. And the MCU is clearly building toward the X-Men's integration. Jean Grey would be a significant piece to put on the board this early, and using Brand New Day as her introduction would make sense given that it's the first MCU film post-Avengers Doomsday, where the larger Marvel universe is clearly starting to change shape. A young, unstable John Gray being pursued by Damage Control who can't see or contain her power sets up both the X-Men threat and the institutional response to mutants in a single story. The alternative theories are Shathra and the Spider Queen. Shathra is a spider-wasp entity from the comics, a predator specifically designed to hunt spider totems like Peter. Her presence would tie directly into the mutation storyline and explain why Peter's powers are destabilizing at this particular moment. The Spider Queen is a different character who in the comics was responsible for mass mutations and was directly connected to Peter's organic web development. Either of those characters would deepen the mutation arc in ways John Gray wouldn't. What all three theories share is that this character is clearly the film's central mystery and probably its biggest threat. Damage Control, treating her as a crisis they can't even see, suggests her abilities operate in a register that conventional superhuman response systems aren't equipped to handle. That framing fits Jean's telepathy more than it fits Shathra's physical predation, which pushes John further ahead as the frontrunner. What no one is saying is that this might be a new character entirely. Marvel's done that before when they want to combine elements from multiple comic characters into a single, coherent film role, but the specific powers on display map too closely to established characters for that to feel likely here. It's worth going a level deeper on the organic webbing because it connects to a specific and genuinely fascinating piece of Spider-Man history that most people don't know. Spider-Man history that most people don't know. When Sam Raimi gave Tobey Maguire organic webbing in 2002, it was a creative decision that Marvel Comics initially resisted and then quietly embraced when the film proved massive. They introduced organic webbing to comics Peter in 2004 in the story Skin Deep, where a villain called the Queen mutated Peter's powers through a radioactive kiss. He briefly became a giant spider before reverting, keeping the organic webs as part of the aftermath. The storyline that followed, The Other, built on that foundation and gave Peter his most significant power upgrade in decades. Then one more day happened. Peter made a deal with Mephisto to save Aunt May's life by erasing his marriage to MJ. Marvel used that reboot to strip Peter back to basics, mechanical web shooters included. The Brand New Day comics that followed were largely about restoring the fun, street-level, single, Peter Parker status quo that the Raimi films had coincidentally also been about. What the MCU is doing is essentially running these storylines in reverse. Peter already has the tragic solo status quo. Now his body is giving him the organic webs. The mutation arc suggests they're heading towards something like The Other, which would give Peter a power upgrade and a deeper connection to whatever spider totem mythology the film is playing with. And all of it is happening under the title Brand New Day, which in the comics was what came after the relationship was erased. The film is using that history as counterpoint. The comics Brand New Day was about going back to basics after losing everything. The MCU Brand New Day is about transforming forward after losing everything. Different conclusions, same starting point. John Bernthal is back as Frank Castle, and this is genuinely one of the most exciting things in the trailer. We see him at the wheel of his battle van, apparently chasing the same tank that Spider-Man is pursuing, which suggests they're on the same mission even if they're clearly not working together by choice. The dialogue confirms Peter knows Frank well enough to call him by his first name, which means their relationship predates this film's events even if we haven't seen it develop on screen. The tension between them is going to be the moral engine of whatever story they're sharing. Spider-Man draws lines about killing. Punisher crosses those lines as a matter of principle. That conflict has been one of the most productive creative tensions in Marvel Comics for 50 years, and the MCU has circled around it without fully committing to it. Brand New Day looks like it's finally going there. What makes it interesting is that they're apparently working the same operation against the same enemy, which means they'll have to operate in proximity long enough for the disagreement to become unavoidable. You can ignore a moral difference when you're on opposite sides. It's harder when you're standing next to each other. Worth noting that a shot in the trailer shows Spider-Man being clipped by Punisher's battle van and seemingly not sensing it coming. That's either a continuity error or a deliberate indicator that Peter's mutation is disrupting his spider sense in ways that are becoming dangerous. If his ability to sense threats is degrading at the same time, his body is changing in unpredictable ways. He's fighting everything at half capacity. That's the specific kind of detail that easy-watching audiences won't catch, but changes how the whole film's stakes read. Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner appears without any Hulk transformation in the trailer, which is notable given that his last prominent MCU appearance had him living as Smart Hulk. He seems to be in an academic or research context, which tracks with earlier reports that the film involves a MIT setting. The rumor that he reverts to something more savage in this film has been circulating since production wrapped, given that his role is clearly about helping Peter understand his mutation. A scene where Banner loses control during that process would fit both the character arc and the plot's escalation. Banner is one of the few people in the MCU who actually understands what involuntary biological transformation feels like from the inside. That's exactly the resource Peter needs and exactly the person who might make things worse by being there. Trammell Tillman plays William Metzger, director of Damage Control, and he appears to have a prominent role in the film. His line about a danger we can't control, one we can't even see, refers to Sync's character, but the damage control angle is worth paying attention to independently. In the MCU, damage control has been positioned as the institutional response to superhuman activity, cleaning up after events, and increasingly policing superhuman individuals. Their pursuit of Sync's character suggests that Brand New Day is going to use damage control as something more than cleanup. They might be functioning as an antagonistic institutional force, a government agency that considers uncontrolled powers a security threat and acts accordingly. That framing would set them up as a longer-term obstacle for the X-Men as Marvel works toward integrating mutants into the MCU. There's also a shot of what appears to be a woman who resembles a former city official reacting to Spider-Man's activities positively, suggesting that publicly Peter's reputation in New York is in a better place than it was during the Mysterio fallout. The city doesn't know who he is, but they like what he does. That social dynamic, being beloved as Spider-Man while being completely alone as Peter, is one of the most painful things this premise could explore. Most people clocked the new suit and moved on, but it needs to be focused on for a minute, as the design choices are specific and they point to something important. The new suit deserves its own moment because it's a classic red and blue with raised black webbing on the red sections, which closely echoes the suit Tobey Maguire wore in Sam Raimi's trilogy. That connection to Raimi's version isn't accidental, given that organic webbing is also coming into play, but the suit's most significant predecessor in the comics is the classic Steve Ditko design from Amazing Fantasy number 15, the very first Spider-Man appearance. The trailer opens with a shot of Peter swinging through New York, carrying a civilian. That's a deliberate recreation of that cover. The film is reaching back to the purest, most foundational version of this character, while simultaneously pushing him into the most transformative storyline of his MCU run. That combination is deliberate. The title was also strategically chosen. Brand New Day in the comics was controversial because it followed One More Day, in which Peter made a deal with Mephisto to erase his marriage to MJ in exchange for Aunt May's life. It was one of the most divisive creative decisions in Marvel history. The MCU's version achieved something similar, Peter erasing himself from MJ's life not through a demonic bargain, but through his own choice. The film reclaims the Brand New Day title for a version of that premise that actually makes emotional sense. Pull back from the individual details, and what you see is a film about a person who's been completely alone for 4 years, whose body is starting to change in ways he doesn't understand, who's surrounded by people who don't know who he is, and who's trying to function as a hero while whatever made him Spider-Man in the first place is reaching some kind of threshold. Here, for Alvarez, The mutation storyline, the Hand, Damage Control, Tombstone's criminal network, and Sadie Sink's unknown character are all separate pieces that probably converge on the same point. The film appears to be synthesizing multiple decades of Spider-Man comics, the Six-Arms saga, the Other, the Totem mythology, the Brand New Day status quo, into a single story about what it means to be the thing you are when you've lost everything else that defines you. Here's what I think the film is actually about underneath all the action. Peter Parker's entire identity in No Way Home's ending was Spider-Man. He gave up Peter Parker to protect everyone, and for 4 years that choice has held, and he's kept the deal, and he's been Spider-Man full-time for a city that doesn't know him. What Brand New Day seems to be asking is, what happens when Spider-Man stops being a choice and starts being something you're becoming, whether you want to or not? The mutation isn't just a power upgrade, it's the universe removing Peter's ability to stop. He can't be just Peter Parker, even if he wanted to be. The spider part is taking over at the biological level. That's a genuinely dark and interesting place to take this character. It's also the most honest examination of what Peter's No Way Home sacrifice actually meant long term. He didn't just lose his relationships, he committed himself to a path that the film is now suggesting has a biological endpoint. The choice was always going to cost more than he understood when he made it. Destin Daniel Cretton directed this, and his previous MCU work was Shang-Chi, which is the best standalone MCU origin film in years, specifically because he understood how to balance mythology, family, and action without the action swallowing the character work. The trailer for Brand New Day has the same balance. The fights look spectacular, and they're clearly going to deliver what the summer audience wants, but the shots that land hardest are Peter at the party, Peter alone in his apartment, Peter watching the life he gave away through a window. That's a filmmaker who knows layers. The details in the trailer make it clear that this will not be the Brand New Day fans remember from the comics, but it will definitely be another top-tier installment in the MCU with many of the same elements and some that no one saw coming. If you want the full breakdown of every confirmed cast member and what their comic book counterparts mean for the story, subscribe to this channel.